Hello YouTube. This happened in November of 2022 during the ongoing war with the Russian Federation. Ukrainian citizens discovered a once lost cave system in the heart of Kyiv, according to Ukrainian media outlets. Specifically, the initiative to uncover and preserve the caves was being led by Dmitro Perov, who works at the Center for Urban Development in Kyiv in Ukrainian or Kyiv in Russian. The tunnels and their enigmatic inscriptions can be dated back to the time of the Kievan Rus state, whose denizens were active in the region between the 9th and the 13th centuries. Perov's attention was drawn to the project when a property came across his desk, which he recognized as his mother's childhood home. His grandmother's childhood home. The street where it is located is a path connecting the areas of Old Kyiv and the historic Podol neighborhood. In 1919, the communists came and made changes, Perov told Ukrainian media. They settled the family in one room on the top floor and occupied the rest of the rooms. His grandmother and great-grandmother lived there until 1979. The family was evicted in 1980, but Perov grew up hearing stories of tunnels under the estate. The grandmother said about that house that there was some cave, explained Perov, but it was more like a children's legend, that somewhere there in the mountain there was a big stone house and next to it an ancient cave. No one knew where it was located. They lived in a different area, but he never explored the estate or the plot near it. Perov told Ukrainian media that after recent excavations, it is now possible to explore two of the cave rooms. While the Ukrainian media also reports that according to an expert of the Center for Urban Development, the site's ultimate fate is still unclear. The Kyiv City Council has yet to make a decision regarding the site's development. Existing historical sources regarding this origin and neighboring sources have not been found. However, according to the parameters, location, and the nature of the vaults, the cave can be classified as a special group of historical Kyiv dungeons, local expert Timur Bobrovsky told Ukrainian journalists. Podol in Russian, Podil in Ukrainian, is a historical district of Kyiv as part of the Podilsky district, which got its name because of its location at the foot of the Kyiv hills on the banks of the Dnieper. I will use Podol as it is better known in the world. Podol is the Dnieper part of the city, an ancient district of artisans and rivermen. The modern layout of the streets was formed after a fire in June of 1811, which completely destroyed the wooden buildings. Several descents lead to Podol from the upper town. The most popular is the Andreevsky Spusk. One of my videos describes quite a mysterious structure there, and from my childhood I remember it's a beautiful location, and it has its mysticism, so to say. Why did the Верхний Val and the Nizhny Val streets got their names? These are the right and the left banks of the ancient city. That's why. Podol at first was disliked and underexplored by archaeologists, but it attracted their attention later. I was born and grew up in Podol on Nizhny Val Street. In that ancient, now gone building, you can see in the first and the last photo in this video. I believe the building was erected in the reign of the Russian Emperor Alexander II, also known as the Liberator. He was a really decent person who had abolished serfdom, removed many restrictions on Jews in the empire, and did other positive things. But he was killed and hunted down and killed by Russian terrorists to promote progress, as they framed it. And many hopes in the Russian Empire were dashed after he died. Very old place that building was, even when I was a boy and a teenager. And we used wood-burning interior stove for some years, I recall. But for me, the best place in the world, and I already mentioned the hills around the area and the incredible things we could find there. Well, we also had a dungeon in the building, completely sealed off, with metal doors bolted to the walls. We, boys, could not get in. Someone had a reason to do this, and I do not think it was the city administration. And to make it clear, not only the boys could not get there, none of the residents could. And of course they would want to use that place as storage, as we did for other areas, for the wood for the winter and a few other things. There were old-timers who recalled legends about the tunnels down below there, and the walls with shimmering inscriptions and strange letters, not Cyrillic, not Latin, not Arabic, and the lights that lived in the tunnel, strange lights, beckoning lights, and the people who went down there but never returned many decades before. And more things. We, boys, were not even allowed to take the old stairwell down to the metal doors, but we tried. I had a number of boys from our courtyard and the next door. We were all friends and we were all exploring the neighborhood, like everywhere else. The building was taken down decades later. I wasn't there, of course, at that time. But I was told that there is an industrial or commercial development on its site a few years ago. And most likely, nowadays, it was hit by the Russian missiles in their continuous onslaught on Kyiv. And as I know, on the Shevchenkovsky section of the Podol, where Nizhny Val is located. I fear for the people of Kyiv who are facing cold winter, no electricity and no water. The winters in Kyiv are very cold, and I remember how water froze in the pipes in the 1960s, and we had to get water from other places in the neighborhood. Since the middle of the 20th century, Podol really began to be studied and excavated, explored, and many exciting discoveries were made. It was not hard to find ancient artifacts in the hills and soil of Podol. Until the 1950s, all archaeological finds in Podol were accidental during the construction projects mostly, just like that November 2022 one. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, scientists preferred to rummage in the area of Starokievskaya mountain on the princely, meaning belonging to the princess, ruins. There are more prestigious objects and richer finds, and in our lower town on the river adjacent terraces where ordinary people once lived, they did not find so much gold and silver. So serious research was not carried out in Podol until a certain time, so much so to say. Now, Lybochitsa is the only underground river in Kyiv, which has been assigned, so to say, a passport of the historical object. It was driven underground in the years 1863-1867, where it flows to this day in an old brick tunnel. On the territory of the current Verkhny, meaning upper, and Nizhny, meaning lower, Wall streets, before serious excavations, many very strange, disparate artifacts of different times were found. Coins from all over the world, from the ancient local ones to Arabic ones, fragments of ceramics from all over the ancient world, weapons from different countries. I mentioned some of the finds we did in the hills. Scientists could not understand what was in that place. Where did such a variety come from? Then it dawned on them. All this, along with all sorts of garbage during heavy rains, was brought down by streams of water and mud from the upper city. This gas for a long time forced many researchers to calm down and relax. They decided that there were no pre-princely settlements in Podol at all, and all the finds came from above. The Kyiv Podol was considered uninhabited for a long time until the 12th century. After all, Nestor, the chronicle of ancient Rus, wrote that before that there were no people living in Podylia, but on the mountain. However, now scientists have already decided that there were people in Podol. According to one account, there was at least a port, shipyards, workshops, and something like a customs house. According to another account, less recognized, Kyiv generally started from here, from Podol, and the ancients only buried their dead on the mountain. This hypothesis has many opponents. It is believed that this place was constantly flooded by regular floods, and it was extremely troublesome to live in such conditions. It is now recognized that people have lived here for at least since the end of the 10th century. It is clear that the inhabitants of Podol were far from the prince's court, not only geographically, but they were also simple artisans and workers from princely construction sites and workshops, and merchants, of course. No aristocrats there. People interested in history know that Podol has been repeatedly and heavily flooded. And the first documented Kyiv deluge flood was recorded in the annals of the beginning of the 12th century. And even before that, floods happened. Nestor, the chronicle, writes that this is why people in Podol do not live there, writing in his time. Regular destructive water arrivals forced part of the Podolians to move higher in the 19th century. So the districts of Tatarka and Lukyanovka were formed, and in ancient times, Podol was destroyed by water or fire in turn. After all, until the 19th century, it was wooden, but people stubbornly returned here and rebuilt. After the disastrous fire of 1811, when most of the buildings were burned down, the streets were redeveloped and brick houses were built. The coastal Podol was flooded regularly in ancient times. It would seem that in the eternal dampness, everything should rot in a couple of years. But it did not. Floods caused thick layers of sand, which, due to hygroscopicity and lack of organic matter, quickly dried and sterilized everything. In such conditions, wood is perfectly preserved. In 1970, during the construction of a subway or a metro station in the area, large-scale excavations were carried out. The remains of several log buildings were excavated. Their walls were preserved intact up to 1 meter high. The logs lay under layers of sand for 800 to 900 years in complete safety, and thanks to this, scientists were able to study the structural features of buildings of that time, make a dendrochronological analysis, and find out the layout of streets and even entire blocks. You may have a question: where did it all go? Were the remaining logs simply buried or thrown away? No. They were given to the Pirogovo Museum to create an appropriate exposition, and there they were simply piled up under a canopy, and it seems that they were reliably forgotten about. The first excavations in Podol were carried out by the expedition of Vladimir Bogusevich in the area of the sports site behind one local school. In the years 1949 to 1950, gas pipes were laid during these works, and the excavation was investigated by archaeologists. At a depth of about 3 meters, the remains of the artisan's estate were found: a log house, a hut of 3 chambers, and a cellar. The base of the adobe kiln and the remains of iron-making production furnaces, accumulations of slag and pieces of iron, have been preserved. That is, it was the Turner's estate. Turner as lathe machine operator, metal worker. In the neighborhood, the remains of semi-earthenware with fragments of glass products, lead blocks, and pieces of smalt were found. Apparently, a craftsman who made glassware and jewelry lived here. The discovery of the Turner's estate was the first study that prompted archaeologists to further searches. In his article, Report on the Expedition, Bohusevich summarized, "Guys, we need to dig here. Ancient city is not only the upper city." Well, and then they began to excavate slowly. Thanks to Podol, major discovery was made in the 1970s in the field of the history of Kyiv and Rus. The locals were not as backward as previously thought. So what was the discovery and how was it made? Previously, scientists were sure that ordinary citizens lived in rather primitive dwellings, in semi-dugouts, землянка. The remains of these structures were often found on the Starokyivska hill, or rather, what was found was interpreted precisely as semi-dugouts. Archaeologists could only judge the type of dwelling indirectly, since only shadows remained from wooden buildings on the mountain for 1,000 years, traces of rotten wooden structures, and the remains of clay furnaces. The long dominance of the established doctrine was facilitated by the fact that most venerable specialists of that time, Mikhail Kargar, adhere to this point of view. In the 1950s, the excavations were carried out on the site of the modern Zhitny market. Wonderful place, I remember from my childhood. The remains of as many as 3 blocks of wooden houses were discovered. Log cabins, huts, in other words, not dugouts. Of course, digging dugouts in a regularly flooded area would be pure madness. For a long time, supporters of the semi-dugouts dwelling theory resisted, claiming that only workshops were log cabins, but more and more ground buildings were dug up in Podol. It was an amazing neighborhood, and it had a number of secrets, some of them metaphysical, like the dungeon I mentioned, and more. Unfortunately, taking advantage of the difficult situation in Ukraine, predatory developers, as local Kyiv people describe them, over the past decade have greatly disfigured the unique appearance of Podol. Many houses of the 19th century were demolished, and monstrous freaks, according to some Kyiv dwellers, were built. But still, this is one of the most beloved places by Kyiv dwellers and visitors, where a special spirit reigns, a little reckless, like me and my friends that came from Podol. What ancient cave monasteries are hidden under Kyiv? Where is the only natural cave in Kyiv? Have you heard something about the dungeons of the Kyiv fortress? There's so much more about Kyiv I would love to share. Just some of it today. As a rule, Kyiv caves were dug in the thickness of the forest rock at the depth of 5 to 20 meters. The forest almost does not let water through and has a very dense structure. The passage dug in this rock up to 1 to 1.5 meters wide and 2 to 3 meters high has remained unchanged for many centuries. The relative ease in processing the continental strata allowed the ancient Kyiv monks to create monumental, grandiose underground labyrinths that have no equal in the Christian world. Most of the non-fortified dungeons are represented by structures of cave monasteries of the 11th through 16th centuries. Underground objects fortified with wood are more common in the Starokyivsk fortress of the 17th century and the brick-lined ones in the Pechersk fortress of the 18th to 19th centuries. 2/3 of Kyiv's dungeons are fortifications and household structures. The most famous in Kyiv are the Lavra caves. Back in the 17th century, military engineer Boplan noted that these caves are cavernous and rocky, warm in winter, cool and dry in summer. According to legend, there is a large underground city under the Pechersk Lavra, where ancient secrets of healing and religion are kept, as well as miraculous icons and mystical books. Caves of the Lavra, of course, are not limited to man-made underground Kyiv. Thus, an extensive system of underground labyrinths exists throughout the territory of the ancient city. On the territory of Kyiv, along the river bank of the Dnieper, about 50 caves are known. Of course, there are those who look for more. It was so in my youth too. Those who do it surreptitiously and tenaciously. Some of them vanish forever. There are strange tales about the phenomena that they had encountered down below. The bank of the Dnieper, where Lavra is located, is composed of porous, easily amenable to pick and shovel the sandstone. The length of the near caves is 383 meters. The far ones are 293 meters. Both labyrinths lie at the depth of 5 to 20 meters. The Varangian or Viking dungeons that have come down to us in an ancient form are adjacent to the distant ones. Norman robbers lived here, ruthlessly raiding merchant ships sailing along the Dnieper River. The Zveryanitsky or menagerie caves are located south of the Lavra. Their name could come from animal traps, which were arranged by the Kyiv princes in the local forests, or from a menagerie, a place where bears and falcons, specifically trained for hunting, this is where they were kept. The red or beautiful courtyard of Prince Vladimir Yaroslavich was located nearby. Later, a settlement arose, which until 1786 belonged to the Kyiv Pechersk Lavra. In 1888, sensational reports about the discovery of caves appeared in Kyiv newspapers. Reporters wrote that not far from the monastery in the lower part of the mountain, where the new powder cellars were located, during the extraction of clay, the entrance to the cave was opened. Monks and scientists were among the first to visit it. The length of the discovered underground corridor was 68 meters. There were 48 burial niches, in which there were 96 burials. Decayed church vestments and crosses were found on the bones. Many valuable finds were stolen by local children. As contemporaries noted, the children playing took out skulls and bones from caves, rolled skulls through the streets and in courtyards, put them on stakes, competed who would throw further. Old-timers punished children for these sinful amusements and predicted all sorts of troubles. But the street urchins did not really listen. While games with the ashes of the dead stopped at the end of the 20th century, when 3 boys disappeared in the menagerie caves. Now, Pustin, in Russian it's Pustin, is a small, spacely furnished cabin and room where a person goes to pray and fast alone in the presence of God. The word Pustin has origin in the Russian word for desert, Pustinya. So, I'm talking about the caves of the Kitayevska Pustin. They are located in the area of the same name in the area of Korchevati. Now, the Kitayevska Pustin of the Kyiv Pechersk Lavra is located there. Approximately from the 10th century, a Slavic settlement, the southern outpost of Kyiv, appeared on Kitai Gora. It was probably part of a network of fortifications built to protect the south of Kievan Rus from nomads. It is possible that this ancient settlement is chronicled where in 1157 Princess Rastislav and Sviatoslav gathered their squads for war with the Polovets nomads. The burial mound of ancient Russian times, or ancient Rus times, is still located south of the settlement. The lands adjacent to the Pustin are dotted with caves. Back in the 17th century, there was a hermit place there. In 1858, the caves were rediscovered by a novice of the monastery, Ivan Taranov, who discovered a sinkhole and made a topographic plan of the caves located 500 meters south of the settlement. The caves are similar in size to the Lavra ones. On the sides of the galleries there are recesses in the forms of cells and tombs. There are large caves in which there were probably underground churches and refectories. After a cursory inspection, the caves were filled and forgotten for almost 60 years. Only in 1910 to 1912, through the efforts of the Kyiv Society for the Protection of Monuments of Antiquity and Art, the study of the dungeons began. The work was carried out by a team of sappers, or combat engineers, under the command of Colonel Pavlov and Captain Markevich. The expedition was headed by Ertel. They had to work in difficult conditions. The fortified vaults of the caves could collapse at any time. The first excavation was made at the site of the sinkhole, where caves were discovered in 1858. 3 passages littered with soil were identified, so the work was postponed. A cave gallery with a height of 1.4 meters was found, which led deep into the mountain and turned to the right, and the researchers descended into it. The remains of a hearth made of bricks, fragments of tiles, flint, sharpeners, fragments of glass vessels, shards of ceramic dishes were found here. After passing the room with the hearth, the expedition got into a chamber with 3 passages. Only the right one, leading to a chamber with a partially collapsed vault, turned out to be accessible. From it, the passage went to the gallery that turned to the left. There were small niches in it on both sides. The gallery ran into a blockage, separating this gallery from the previous passage, which crossed the cave under examination at right angles. The research continued on the opposite side of the blockage, and along a new trench got deep into the cave. Inscriptions in Slavic letters were found on the walls of the cave, painted with soot from a candle or torch on the arches of the cave crosses. Niches were found in the gallery. The movement of the researchers was blocked by another blockage. When it was dismantled, a hearth of red and white bricks with remnants of charcoal and ash was found. The drawings and diaries of the head of this expedition, Ertel, were lost or made to be lost. The tiles, pieces of ceramics, flint, pottery, etc. found during the exploration have not been preserved. Ertel believed that the caves were built in ancient times, represent a cave city of a rather large size. Those who have followed my research know of my account of the ancient rocket discovered in Kyiv around the time of World War I. It was reburied and later rediscovered and removed from Kyiv in pieces in Stalin's times. This find is directly related to the hypothesis of ancient advanced civilizations and India. I will speak more about Kyiv's secrets and unusual discoveries there in the future. Look, even over 1,000 years ago, Kyiv was a multicultural city where Slavs, Jews, Vikings, Arabs, Byzantines, nomads, and other people resided and traded there. I hope the city survives the war, which I believe is going to expand more in the coming months, because this is a quagmire that may have no bottom and is more terrifying than ancient secrets of the ancient metropolis. This is my opinion. If you like my research, please support me. You will find the descriptions on how to do it in the description to this video. If you look through my channel, and you'll find quite a lot about the history of the ancient Kyiv and Rus, Kyiv, also ancient Russia, and other parts of Eurasia. It's a very complicated history, very interesting, and there is much more to tell you. Thank you for your attention to my work. Please tell others about my channel and please subscribe.